I want to talk about enablement teams. So usually what I'm doing is I'm trying to get together a group of folks that can sort of own the change, whether it's a mid-sized company sort of scaling or it's a bigger company. Usually if you're really early stage, this isn't something you need to worry about quite yet. But let's change our stickies here. I'm not sure why I'm getting circles. Anyway, so let's talk about who's on this team. So usually what I want is I want a group of people together who can make decisions and also have funding or quick access to funding. It's not several steps away from them. So you can talk about like the VP of product is usually somebody that's going to be on here. Typically we have VP, usually VP level, sometimes C level, but usually C levels kind of, they're involved, but they're not spearheading it. They're more just supporting it. So you can say VP of engineering, right? We might have like VP of marketing, right? And so forth. So usually what happens is we want sort of this, I would say like cross-functional representation of folks that can help with regards to the change efforts. Okay. Now, I've been a part of transformations where we had a bigger spread. So for example, we might start here, but we also bring in, let's say like somebody from finance. We might have sales involved, right? As well as marketing. We might also have some ops people involved. We might also have some folks from HR, right? So, so basically, what I'm trying to get at here is usually when I'm brought in to help a company systematically start addressing all the pieces that need to be in place to kind of like repeatedly test ideas, there needs to be some level of ownership and stability there of folks that have authority, and they can also get to funding decisions. They can get to funding, and we can help kind of start piecing this piece together. So I like calling enablement team. There are other things you can call them as well. But basically this idea of it's a group of leaders that come together for the change, okay? The next big part of this is what I call a strategy map. It's got a bunch of different names. Really what it is, it's almost like an elaborate mind map for strategy and for change. And so what I do here is I start to take this team with my guidance and we start to build out a lot of what we're going to do from a strategy point of view. First off, it really comes down to, so what's your goal, right? So your goal from a leadership point of view might be, okay, here's where we are now, but we're trying to find new growth, we're trying to find new revenue, and we don't really have a way of doing it repeatedly. So it might be something like we want to repeatedly test new ideas quickly, right? So this idea, like we want to basically go fast and we want to find a way to find these ideas, and we also want to be able to test them quickly. So first off, we talk about just what's our goal. Like you kind of need a goal. I have a hard time with a lot of change strategy that doesn't have a goal. So this idea of it could be continuously test new ideas or however you want to frame it, but it's this way of thinking about what's our goal and what's what are we moving to, because everything has to kind of support that goal basically, right? So if you think about some of the things in this case, I'll just kind of remove some of the labels here. So let's think about what are the pieces that we need to make up that goal, right? So we need, we need teams. Like we need teams to be able to do this testing. So we need teams that can support basically rapidly testing or repeatedly testing new ideas quickly. We're also going to need ideas. You're going to have a pipeline of ideas, and we'll get into that too. But these are two sort of pieces, and there's many, many more than this, but I'm just going to share a few with you today. And then you're also going to need funding. You're going to need funding to be able to support your goal. So if we say, okay, there's a big all hands, we talk about, okay, here's where we're going as a company and all that. And this idea of like, here's our goal, right? We're going to spin up this capability, being able to repeatedly test new ideas quickly. And we know most of them are going to fail. So we need this combination of, we need to have teams and we need to have ideas, we need to have funding. There's much more to it than that, but I'm just making a very simplified version for you all today. So from there, it's, well, what do we need? Like, how do we start figuring out what do we need with these teams? Well, there's going to be some level of we need people. Well, first off, they need to be cross-functional, right? So we need cross-functional teams that are, I'm going to say dedicated, but in reality, it's really hard to get all the dedication, but you need teams that can actually have like a steady state and circle around ideas. Otherwise, it becomes really hard to do this in your spare time. And I think that's a big realization leaders are having right now, is that it's really tough to do this in your spare time. Let's say you spend 10% of your time trying to find new opportunities for growth inside your company and new revenue streams. It's not a lot of time. You might learn the process of how to do it, but you're not necessarily going to find things that are actually like apply it to the business, right, and actually de-risk the business idea. There's other aspects of teams. You basically need to figure out sort of like your incentive. I'm going to say incentive structure, right, for teams. So basically, if you're asking them, okay, we're going to have people who are really comfortable with uncertainty, that are going to take these ideas and run with them and test them, right? So we need some aspect of, well, we're going to have cross-functional teams that we can get together. And we're talking about small cross-functional teams. And we need some kind of incentive structure to help them do this, right? We're also probably going to need like coaching and training support, right? And that's usually a combination of internal coaches and external. I'm a big believer of training up people inside organizations so they can do it themselves. And so I like this idea of not having like some kind of dependency or whatnot on external folks, but it does help to bring in folks, especially that know how to do this. And so if your teams have never worked this way, then it is going to be a bit of a learning curve to say, okay, we need to be cross-functional. So, product design, engineering kind of working together. We also need an incentive structure for them where they're incentivized to work this way. And then we also need coaching and training support to help them. So it's not just going to magically happen. It's not going to just magically be willed into fruition. You do need to figure out how to do it and put it in action. So this is sort of how the beginning of the map starts to get built out. So we as an enablement team, right? So remember the enablement team over here. So you have like a group of people. It doesn't have to be quite this big, but it's really important to have cross-functional representation in it of people that have authority and can access budget, right? And so you get them together and you start building this out and you start figuring out, oh, okay, so first off, we need to figure out who's going to be on these teams. There's a good chance there are people in your org that are already really creative and they're entrepreneurial and they're innovative. They're just not really given permission sometimes. And they come up in like really interesting ways. So you can find somebody that pulled this project out of the fire, and you're like, wow, that never should have happened. Somehow this person made it happen. And you start realizing, oh, they did this and this and this to make that happen. And maybe they'd be a good fit for this, right? Or you have, product people that are really great with early stage and they don't really want to scale something, So you will be able to find these people in your work. But there's many more aspects to this. But when you think of teams, you're like, okay, we need, teams that are cross-functional, dedicated. We need to give them some kind of an incentive structure, and then we need some sort of like coaching and training support for them, right? Next off, let's move to ideas. So we need a pipeline of ideas. Basically, we need to create a pipeline of ideas that there's some quantity of them, right? So what'll happen here is, let's say you get your team set up, and then let's say you only have like 2 or 3 ideas you want to test, and there's nothing else kind of in the hopper, so to speak. what'll happen is these teams will cling to the ideas that are there, and even if they should kill them, because they don't see other ideas to work on, and they're afraid of their job security, and they're afraid they won't have anything else to work on if they're not working on that idea. So it's very important to start to get like a pipeline of early stage ideas that, so we know roughly 8 or 9 out of 10 fail in some degree. And so if you're churning through that many ideas, right? Let's say you have 250 ideas and only one of them is going to be a mega success, then you need to have a pipeline of early stage ideas. Otherwise, you get some weird dysfunction when you're working through your strategy where, oh, you know what, we only had 2 or 3 ideas and they should have killed them. Why aren't they killing them? Oh, it's because we don't have any other ideas, in the pipeline. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of, I would call it like an innovation thesis, or like guidelines, basically. So what you want to stay away from is, with your ideas, you go so far beyond what you're capable of doing that you actually find cool things to work on, but your teams are not necessarily able to bring those forward, and you're not able to get the funding, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So this idea of, it depends on the organization, but usually when I'm working with orgs, we're trying to figure out how do we do something sort of like what we already are good at. We want to do it in a different way and generate more revenue. All right. So when you think about it that way, it's like, oh, how can I reimagine this? And I've shared these stories many times. So like when I'm working with automotive companies, they don't want to be known as like car companies or automotive companies. They want to be known as mobility companies, right? They want to be able to reimagine what they're already good at, which is like getting people from like A to B, right? And how do we do that in other formats and use our domain expertise, and not necessarily just about car sales, right? So that's where you see companies go into bike sharing or ride sharing or urban analytics about traffic patterns and things like that, or mobile parking and all this stuff. So you'll notice that, the companies that are trying to be innovative and try to like repeatedly find new things for growth, they're trying to reimagine what they do in a domain they already sort of understand. But there are many, many different ways they can make money other than just selling cars, right? The other thing with ideas is you're going to need basically like a process to like weed them out, or slash invest in them. And we'll talk about this a little bit with the funding, but it doesn't mean you just work on these ideas forever, right? So what tends to happen here is there's a combination of, we want a lot of ideas that are early stage, have a lot of uncertainty. We want some sort of thesis or guidelines that help people weed out the ones we shouldn't even be working on whatsoever, which kind of feeds into this. And we also need a process here, which, ends up being a bunch of more circles than just this, but I'm just trying to simplify it for you all today, of how are we going to start like assessing these ideas, basically. Okay. So far, we've talked about teams and what we need from a team's perspective, and then also what do we need from an ideas perspective. And this is just really scratching the surface of your strategy, right? Now, let's talk about funding. So funding is often overlooked in this because we think, oh, it's just experimentation. We can do it for free. Quite often you cannot just do it for free. It does require money. Now, granted, it's depending on your industry, it might be far less money, but it does require money, right? So first off, we need what I would call like protected or slash secured funding, right? So what happens in organizations is that we forget to like secure this. And we might say, oh, you know what, team, you have like $1 million to work with, and we're going to fund all these different ideas. And then a lot of that money gets siphoned off into other projects by leadership. And then we say, oh, you know what, you have $200,000 now. And you're like, wait, we didn't go through 800K already. And it's because, it just got rerouted, right? So there is an idea of securing this, right? So make it hard to repurpose for other things. I've seen companies go to extremes here, to the extent where they literally spin up a wholly owned subsidiary and put the money there. So it really depends on your org, but don't underestimate the the challenges with protecting it. I think I did early on in my career when I was coaching some companies. So you do want to be very careful about how you protect this and put some safeguards in place. Next, you're going to need some kind of metered funding or internal sort of VP process or VC process, basically. So what this is not all this money gets doled out at once into one idea, right? We progress. So we say with what we have here, we're going to proportionally invest in more based on the evidence we have, right? And I've done a lot of workshops on that and a bunch of metered funding and everything. And so just to scratch the surface here, basically it's like proportional investment. So the stronger evidence you have over time, you want to invest more. So that's something you can take over and actually grow it as a business versus early stage. You don't want to overfund because then people just jump to build and then you kind of are left with stuff that nobody wants, right? In addition to that, you need funding for experiments. So in addition to just like funding and metered funding and process and securing it in general, you're also going to need funding for the test. So for example, if you're B2C and you can go to your local coffee shop or cafe and find your customers, that's one thing. But if you are going after, let's say, cardiologists, then that's going to be much more expensive. And so if you have just a really quick landing page you can spin up, that's fine. A lot of my B2B companies don't have that opportunity. So when you think about it, you're basically starting to build out with, again, your enablement team. Hey, this is our goal. What are the things we need to do and capabilities we need to create inside our company to support that goal? So everything's still tied back to this. And so you have your teams, your ideas, and your funding. So where does that all go? Basically, that goes into your change board. So this should look very, very similar. You can think about Kanban board or experiment board. Basically, I try to keep these very simple. And this idea of to do and progress done, and then some sort of analysis. You might also have a spot here, like a column where you decompose things and you start breaking them down into smaller tasks. But what you're doing here is you're saying, okay, let's just say, let's take this one, right? So we're going to take cross-functional teams that are dedicated. All right, so what are all the things we need to do to make that happen in our org, right? It just doesn't magically happen. So there's all these different things you're going to have to work through as a team to make this happen over time, right? So as you create these tasks, what tends to happen is they start moving across here. It's like, okay, we're working on this. Here are some things we're working on. Okay, we finished this. What does that look like? Let's look at some analysis. We set up some teams. What did that do? And you're often coming back here to your map and you're saying, oh, you know what? Do we need to add other stuff here? Do we need to change something here? So in a way, this is very iterative with regards to the interaction between your strategy map and your change board. Because as you analyze things, you're going to come back and say, like what happened here? Did we have unintended side effects? Do we need to modify our change strategy approach? All right. So in a way, these become sort of like living documents. This is like a living map, right? That is owned by the enablement team, right? Zoom in a little bit here. So this team here, right, helps put together this map with some help, usually mine. And we start to identify what's our goal, and then what are the things that we need to support that goal, and then what are the things we need to do to support that, right? So this is why I like a mind map, because it's all connected. You're not all going off and saying, you know what, we need this robust blah, blah, blah. And you go off and down this tangent and you realize, you know what, that doesn't even help us reach our goal, right? So it might sound silly, but I've seen this go off the rails many times. So you kind of want your team to be able to have input and ownership of the creation and maintenance of the map and owning it, right? So this is your strategy essentially. And then that team, you're bringing these items over and then you're breaking them down into actionable change inside your org. And either quite often it's not necessarily, the VP level running all these tasks through. Sometimes it's a direct reports, and other people that are pulled into the change strategy, right? But you're bringing them in to sort of move this over, and then you're reviewing it in a very open and honest way. Like I've had some leadership teams literally just, review this board in front of like most of the organization, and the whole org could see what's going on. They could just walk over and look. So there is something really great about that. And there's a level of trust there of, oh, you're not going off in a corner and just making up this new strategy and just executing it. You're actually keeping us in the loop on what you're doing, So this is how I approach the beginnings of change strategy. Again, they're usually multi-year efforts, but it's not just a plan where you go off and execute and just hope it all works out. I'm bringing a team together that can own the change. I'm putting together a strategy map with them, helping them set up their change board and work through the change together. And this evolves over time.